Ladies and gentlemen, in the shadows of history, there often lie figures whose stories echo far beyond their time, figures whose lives become prototypes, patterns repeated across generations. One such figure emerges when we look at the turbulent story of Hamas and Gaza, a modern-day reflection of an ancient drama, a living echo of a name from the past, Shimshon, the mighty judge of Israel. Shimshon was a man set apart, chosen by God, gifted with great strength and a destiny to confront the enemies of his people. Yet his life was marked by conflict, by betrayal, by a dangerous closeness to those who would be his downfall. In the depths of his story, there is a mystery, a warning, and a pattern, a prototype that shadows the land even now. Like Shimshon, the forces behind Hamas rise with fierce power, born in conflict and fueled by vengeance. They are both a weapon and a warning, strength used in the shadow, power wielded without restraint, a volatile force whose destruction comes at great cost. Shimshon's strength was both his gift and his curse, a fire that could build and burn. So, too, the struggle over Gaza is marked by such fire, destruction intertwined with purpose, violence wrapped in ancient grievances. But Shimshon's story is not just one of strength and ruin. It is a story of the consequences of betrayal, of the dangerous dance with those who seem allies but carry the seeds of downfall. The lesson is carved deep in the land. Power without wisdom, strength without restraint, leads to collapse. The prototype in Hamas and Gaza is a living reminder of what happens when fury replaces justice, when might is severed from mercy, and when ancient wounds are reopened without healing. This ancient pattern calls us to look deeper, beyond the headlines, beyond the battles, to the spiritual currents that shape a land. It is a call to understand the forces at play, not only of politics and power, but of history repeating itself through the ages, shaping destinies and demanding reckoning. Shimshon was a man unlike any other in the history of Israel, a man chosen from birth, set apart for a divine purpose. His strength was legendary, a gift bestowed by God to confront the enemies who oppressed his people. But his story is not just about physical power. It is about the complex interplay between destiny and weakness, between divine calling and human frailty. Shimshon's life reveals a prototype of a power that can both save and destroy, a power that carries the seeds of its own undoing. From the moment of his birth, Shimshon was marked by a covenant with God, a Nazirite vow that symbolized his separation and dedication. His strength was a supernatural force, yet it was tied to his obedience and faithfulness. When he strayed from that path, when he revealed his secrets, when he compromised his vows, his power waned. His downfall came not from the enemies outside, but from the betrayal within, from a woman who pierced the heart of his purpose. This prototype is one of tragic paradox. The very gift that made Shimshon mighty also made him vulnerable. His story is a warning that strength alone is not enough. It must be accompanied by wisdom, by discipline, by alignment with divine will. The consequences of ignoring this balance are devastating. The destruction that Shimshon unleashed in his final act was as much a judgment on himself as on his foes. In the modern landscape, this ancient narrative echoes in unexpected places. The forces behind Hamas, the tensions surrounding Gaza, bear the mark of this Shimshon prototype, a power born of struggle, a strength that threatens to consume itself and those around it. It is a story repeated across generations, a cycle of rise and fall, of strength and vulnerability, of promise and peril. The Shimshon prototype reminds us that true strength is not merely physical, but spiritual and moral, requiring humility and fidelity to withstand the trials that come. The roots of Hamas trace back to a complex web of history, ideology, and unresolved grievances. To understand this force, one must look beyond the immediate, beyond the headlines, into the deeper soil from which it sprang. Like ancient seed planted in fertile but troubled ground, Hamas grew from decades of conflict, displacement, and a yearning for identity and power. It is a movement born not only of political struggle, but of spiritual and historical forces that stretch back through generations. The birth of Hamas is tied to the desperation and frustration of a people who feel betrayed by promises unkept and rights denied. It is the manifestation of pain transformed into action, anger given form in militant resistance. Yet this birth is not without its shadows. It carries with it the burdens of radicalism, extremism, and a willingness to employ violence as a means to an end. The ideology that drives Hamas is woven with strands of religious fervor and political ambition, creating a volatile mix that fuels ongoing conflict. The Gaza Strip, the heart of Hamas's power, is itself a symbol of confinement and resistance, a land boxed in by borders and siege, where hope and despair collide. The people living there bear the scars of history, displacement, war, and blockade, but also the fierce will to survive and assert their identity. Hamas acts as both protector and oppressor, a force that promises liberation but delivers cycles of violence. This prototype of a movement built on grievance and fire reflects the ancient patterns of tribal conflict and prophetic judgment. It reveals how unresolved wounds can give birth to new storms, how bitterness festers into rebellion, and how strength without restraint spirals into destruction. The story of Hamas is not isolated. It is part of a larger tapestry of history repeating itself, a modern chapter in the age-old struggle for power, survival, and destiny. The power that Hamas wields today is a force born of both desperation and defiance. It is a power shaped by years of struggle, forged in the fires of conflict, and sustained by a narrative of resistance that resonates deeply with its followers. This power is not merely political or military. It is a spiritual and psychological force that binds together a people who see themselves as engaged in a sacred fight for survival and identity. Hamas's power is raw and relentless, marked by acts that shock and provoke, intended to assert dominance and command attention on the world stage. It is a power that thrives in the shadows, using asymmetrical tactics to challenge an overwhelmingly superior opponent. The strength of Hamas is in its ability to adapt, to mobilize, and to inspire loyalty through a message that combines faith, nationalism, and martyrdom. This combination makes it both dangerous and difficult to dismantle. Yet this power carries within it a paradox. While it offers a sense of strength and purpose, it also traps those who wield it in cycles of violence and retribution. The power is unstable, fueled by hatred and fear, and prone to self-destruction. Just as Shimshon's strength was tied to a fragile secret, the power of Hamas is vulnerable to the very forces it unleashes. It is a power that can bring destruction not only to its enemies, but to the very people it claims to protect. The prototype of this power is one of volatile energy, unrestrained force, and a dangerous dance between strength and weakness. It serves as a reminder that power without wisdom and restraint can become a consuming fire, burning everything in its path. The story of Hamas's power is a reflection of an ancient truth, that might alone does not secure victory, and that true strength must be rooted in purpose and guided by a higher hand. Betrayal is a wound that cuts deeper than any sword, and it is at the heart of the Shimshon story, a betrayal that brought down the mighty and altered the course of history. Shimshon, despite his great strength and divine calling, was undone not by external enemies alone, but by a betrayal from within, a trusted one who pierced his soul and shattered his purpose. This betrayal was not merely personal. It was a spiritual fracture that revealed the vulnerability beneath the strength. In the modern context, this pattern of betrayal echoes in the alliances and conflicts surrounding Gaza and Hamas. The forces at play are marked by shifting loyalties, hidden agendas, and the breaking of trust that deepens the wounds of an already fragile region. Betrayal here is not just an act, but a symptom of a deeper brokenness, a land torn apart by those who were once thought to be allies or family, now turned adversaries. Betrayal fractures communities and nations alike. It breeds suspicion, fuels hatred, and perpetuates cycles of violence. It leaves scars that run deep and wounds that take generations to heal. The betrayal that Shimshon faced was a warning that power without vigilance and faithfulness is vulnerable to ruin from within. It is a reminder that the greatest dangers are often those closest to the heart. This prototype of betrayal behind the scenes reveals a tragic dynamic, a strength compromised by deceit, a mission endangered by treachery. It calls for discernment and wisdom, for the ability to see beyond appearances and understand the hidden currents shaping conflict and power. Betrayal is a force that can undo the mightiest plans and bring down even the strongest pillars. And in the story of Hamas and Gaza, this ancient pattern plays out once again with devastating consequences. The destruction wrought by Shimshon was immense, a force unleashed in his final moments that shook the foundations of his enemies and his own people alike. It was a destruction born not just of physical strength, but of deep pain, betrayal, and a desire for justice that blurred the lines between vengeance and salvation. This destruction was both an act of judgment and a cry of desperation, a powerful reminder of what happens when divine gifts are misused or misunderstood. In the story of Hamas and Gaza, this pattern of destruction is vividly echoed. The cycle of violence that engulfs the region is relentless, marked by destruction that affects not only combatants but innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. The destruction is a harsh reality that has shaped the landscape and the lives of millions, leaving scars that run deep across generations. It is a force that seems uncontrollable, a tempest fueled by hatred, fear, and unresolved conflict. This destruction serves as both a consequence and a warning. It is the natural outcome when power is wielded without restraint, and when justice is pursued through violence rather than reconciliation. The destruction that falls on Gaza and the ongoing conflict around it is a modern echo of Shimshon's final act, a reminder that destruction, even when aimed at enemies, carries a heavy cost. It consumes the land, the people, and the future, often blurring the lines between victim and aggressor. Yet within this destruction lies a call to reflection and change. It challenges those involved to consider the paths they choose and the legacies they leave behind. The story of destruction is not just about loss, but about the urgent need for restoration, for breaking the cycle of violence, and for seeking a way forward that honors life rather than takes it. It is a powerful testament to the consequences of conflict left unchecked and the desperate need for a deeper healing. The land of Gaza is more than just a physical place. It is a symbol of confinement, struggle, and deep-seated conflict. Surrounded by borders and blockades, it represents a pressure cooker of human despair and resilience, a place where hope and desperation collide daily. Gaza's walls are not just barriers of concrete and wire. They are the walls of history, ideology, and unresolved pain that trap its people and define their existence. Within Gaza, life is lived under siege, limited movement, scarce resources, and constant threat. The people endure hardships that breed both resistance and suffering. The land itself has become a crucible where generations are shaped by conflict, and where the tension between survival and destruction is ever present. Gaza is a place where identity is fiercely held, where every act of defiance carries the weight of a collective story of loss and endurance. This land, much like Shimshon's story, is marked by paradox. It is a place of strength born from struggle, yet it is also a place vulnerable to collapse. Gaza's struggles mirror the ancient battles between captivity and freedom, between oppression and deliverance. It is a modern battleground where the echoes of history play out in real time, revealing the spiritual and political forces that shape the destiny of a people. The symbolism of Gaza as a trapped land extends beyond geography. It is a metaphor for the entrapment of spirit and the cycles of violence that hold a people captive. The land's physical confinement reflects the deeper bondage of hatred, fear, and unresolved wound. Understanding Gaza requires seeing these layers, the physical, emotional, and spiritual walls that enclose it. This trapped land challenges those who observe it to recognize the urgency of breaking the cycles that bind it, and to seek paths of release and renewal that go beyond the visible conflict. The struggle for identity is at the core of the conflict surrounding Hamas and Gaza. It is not merely a political contest or a territorial dispute. It is a battle over the very soul of a people. Identity here is shaped by history, faith, memory, and a longing for recognition, a complex tapestry woven through generations of suffering and resilience. The forces behind Hamas claim to embody this identity, presenting themselves as the defenders of a cause deeply rooted in both land and belief. This struggle for identity fuels the passion and the violence, as each side seeks to assert its narrative and its right to exist. For those in Gaza, identity is intertwined with resistance against perceived occupation and injustice. It is a fierce assertion of presence, a declaration that they will not be erased or forgotten. Hamas harnesses this identity as both shield and sword, rallying supporters with the promise of honor, dignity, and reclamation. But this struggle also traps those involved in cycles of conflict that threaten to consume the very identity they seek to protect. When identity becomes tied exclusively to conflict and opposition, it risks becoming a prison rather than a source of strength. The fight for recognition can harden into hostility, and the yearning for justice can turn to bitterness. The identity shaped by struggle often carries scars that are passed down, perpetuating wounds instead of healing them. The prototype of this identity struggle reveals how deeply intertwined personal and collective narratives are with the broader conflict. It shows that at the heart of political battles lie questions of belonging and self-understanding. This ongoing struggle shapes not only the present but also the future, determining whether the cycle of conflict will continue or whether new paths to reconciliation and peace might emerge. Understanding this dimension is essential to grasping the full scope of the conflict and its enduring hold on the land and its people. The spiritual dimension behind Hamas and Gaza is often overlooked, but is central to understanding the depth of the conflict. It is not merely a clash of political interests or territorial claims, but a profound struggle over faith, meaning, and purpose. The forces driving Hamas are wrapped in a narrative of divine destiny and religious conviction, which shapes their actions and justifies their resistance. This spiritual zeal fuels the intensity of the conflict, giving it a sense of inevitability and higher calling. This spiritual dimension is complex and multifaceted. On one hand, it provides hope and strength to those who feel oppressed and marginalized. It offers a framework that transforms suffering into sacrifice, pain into purpose. For many, the struggle is seen as part of a cosmic battle between good and evil, a sacred duty to defend their faith and their land. This belief system imbues the conflict with a seriousness and urgency that transcends political calculations. On the other hand, this spiritual fervor can also deepen divisions and make compromise more difficult. When conflict is cast in terms of divine mandate, the space for negotiation shrinks and the stakes become absolute. It can lead to a hardened mindset where enemies are not just political opponents but existential threats, and where violence is sanctified as a tool of holy warfare. This spiritual intensity can perpetuate cycles of hatred and retribution, making peace elusive. The prototype revealed here is one where faith and conflict are intertwined, where religion becomes both a source of empowerment and a barrier to reconciliation. Understanding this spiritual layer is crucial to grasping the full picture of Hamas and Gaza. It shows that beyond the physical battles and political maneuvers, there is a deeper war for hearts and souls, a struggle that shapes the identity, actions, and future of those involved. This dimension calls for a different kind of engagement, one that addresses not only the visible conflict, but the unseen spiritual forces at work. The ongoing conflict in Gaza is a cycle that repeats itself with relentless persistence, a pattern shaped by history, pain, and unresolved grievances. This cycle traps generations in a loop of violence and retaliation, where every act of aggression begets another, and peace remains a distant hope. The cycle is not only political or military, it is deeply rooted in human emotions: fear, anger, humiliation, and the desire for justice or revenge. This pattern of cyclical violence is like a storm that sweeps across the land, uprooting lives and sowing destruction, yet never fully dissipating. Each flare-up seems to confirm the fears and hatred on all sides, reinforcing the belief that the other is an enemy who cannot be trusted or reconciled with. The cycle feeds on itself, growing stronger with each iteration, making it harder to break free. The people caught in this cycle suffer the most, often paying the highest price. Innocent lives are lost, homes destroyed, and communities shattered. Yet the violence continues, driven by the desire to defend honor, claim rights, and assert power. The cycle becomes a trap, binding both victim and aggressor in a shared fate of suffering and loss. This recurring pattern reflects an ancient truth seen throughout history, that unresolved conflict and unhealed wounds lead to repetition and escalation. The cycle demands a reckoning, a willingness to confront the past and seek new ways forward. Without this, the pattern will persist, dragging future generations into the same destructive dance. Understanding this cycle is essential to grasping the reality of Gaza and Hamas. It reveals that the conflict is not a series of isolated events, but part of a larger, ongoing narrative shaped by human frailty and stubbornness. The challenge lies in finding a way to break the cycle, something that requires more than political solutions. It calls for transformation in hearts and minds. Hope flickers faintly amid the darkness surrounding Gaza and the conflict that defines it. Despite the relentless violence, the destruction, and the deep wounds that seem impossible to heal, there remains a spark, an ember of possibility that refuses to be extinguished. This hope is fragile, born not of naivete, but of a deeper understanding that even in the bleakest moments, renewal is possible. It is a reminder that history is not only a record of judgment, but also a canvas for redemption. Hope calls for courage, the courage to imagine a future beyond the cycles of hatred and revenge. It asks for the bravery to reach across divides, to listen to the voices of the other, and to seek common ground where none seems to exist. Hope is the quiet force that challenges despair, urging those trapped in conflict to believe in the possibility of peace, reconciliation, and restoration. It is a call to look beyond immediate pain and to envision a new beginning. This hope is not blind to the reality of suffering, but acknowledges it while refusing to be defeated by it. It is a hope grounded in faith, that no darkness is so deep that it can swallow the light, no oppression so strong that it can extinguish freedom. In the ancient stories, hope is often the final act, the promise that after judgment comes mercy and after destruction, restoration. The prototype of hope amid Gaza's turmoil reveals a powerful truth, that no conflict is beyond the reach of transformation if hearts are willing to change. It invites reflection on what must be done to move from brokenness to healing, from enmity to friendship. This hope is a call to action, a reminder that even the smallest flicker can grow into a flame capable of lighting the way forward for generations to come.